Geopolitical shockwaves. The world teeters on the edge of a major power reshuffle, and Ukraine is right at the center of the storm. Could peace itself be just a pawn in the grand strategic game? Donald Trump's team is crafting a global play aimed at countering China. Washington is trying to pull Russia away from Beijing and redraw the balance of power across the world. But the drama doesn't end there. Europe is stepping onto the board with its own unpredictable move. The President of Finland is proposing a risky trade, support for Ukraine in exchange for assistance in another strategic region. Will this high-stakes plan work, or is the world about to witness another gamble with consequences nobody can fully foresee? Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. A shocking twist has surfaced. Donald Trump may be aiming to bring peace to Ukraine, not just for peace itself, but as part of a bigger geopolitical chess move to weaken the alliance between Russia and China. According to Politico, this isn't just diplomacy, it's strategy with a long shadow. Inside Trump's circle, the logic sounds almost like a high-stakes gamble. Push Russia to end the war, help it recover economically, pour in American investment, and just like that, tilt the global balance away from China. Simple on paper. In reality, more like trying to rewire the world with a handshake. This risky approach is raising eyebrows in Ukraine, and not without reason. It reveals a controversial belief inside the administration that the real global threat isn't Vladimir Putin, but China. A statement that sounds bold, unsettling, and slightly detached from the battlefield reality. Countering China may not be the only goal, but it explains why, after more than a year of stalled talks and repeated threats to walk away, Trump's envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are still chasing a breakthrough. Persistence or political deja vu depends on who you ask. One administration official told Politico that the current effort to move closer to Russia could create a completely new balance of power with China, something they describe as very, very beneficial. Critics might call it something else, very, very optimistic. Politico notes that this angle, using Ukraine peace talks as a tool against China, hasn't been publicly emphasized before. Many observers, however, are skeptical. As long as Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping remain in power, the chances of driving a wedge between them look slim at best. Meanwhile, the idea of offering Russia economic incentives to cozy up to the US is causing serious concern in Ukraine. Because for Kyiv, this isn't a bold new plan, it feels like a rerun.
We've seen similar attempts before, and they led nowhere. Germany tried this approach with its Ostpolitik, and now Russia is waging the bloodiest war in Europe.
As for hopes of splitting China and Russia apart, a Ukrainian official delivered a blunt reality check. Both countries share one powerful common denominator. They see the US not as a partner, but as a rival rooted in democratic values they openly reject. Meanwhile, Alexander Stubb is cooking up a bold, some might say risky proposal to Donald Trump. The idea? A geopolitical trade. Europe helps secure the Strait of Hormuz from Iran, and in return the US fully backs Ukraine. A deal straight out of a high-stakes poker game, where the chips are global security. The idea emerged during a Q&A at Chatham House. Stubb didn't dismiss it. In fact, he called it a very good idea. Now he plans to dig deeper with his team. Whether this becomes a strategy or just another think tank fantasy remains to be seen. Stubb also warned the Ukraine peace talks are approaching a critical and dangerous moment. There's a real risk Kyiv could be cornered into a bad deal, one that hands territory to Vladimir Putin. Or worse, the talks could collapse entirely. Diplomacy, as always, walks a tightrope over a political abyss. Despite his access, Stubb remains realistic about his influence over Trump. Their 7-hour golf and dinner diplomacy session may have built rapport, but not control.
I have no illusions about who can actually convince President Trump. If I manage to push even 1 out of 10 ideas on Ukraine, I'll call that a win.
He added that he hopes Ukraine-Russia talks won't collapse like the stalled negotiations between Iran and the US, a subtle hint that history might be repeating itself again. Protesters in Cuba are smashing administrative buildings and stores. For the third day in a row, mass protests are taking place in the country due to the energy and food crisis. And all of this comes after Donald Trump promised to liberate the island of freedom. Here are the details.
Cuba is next in line on Trump's list. He is preparing to overthrow the communists there and make the island truly free.
All my life I've heard about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States finally do it? I believe I will have the honor of taking Cuba. It will be a great honor.
To take over Cuba?
To take over Cuba one way or another? I mean, to liberate it or to take it. I think I could do whatever I want with it. Do you want to know the truth? Right now, it's a very weakened country.
The Trump factor is at play. Well, it was precisely the Trump administration during its first term that introduced the strategy of maximum pressure on Cuba. He put Cuba back on the list of state sponsors of terrorism. That's a very toxic label. That is, international banks are afraid and there's no tourism at all. Everyone is afraid of US sanctions. Now Cuba is a museum of poverty and retro cars. But still, Putin's ally is right there, next to the United States. And that's why Donald Trump has this idea. The last of Putin's allies in the region needs to be kicked out.
The president of Cuba stated that they are in negotiations with the US, but so far they haven't reached any consensus.
In accordance with the policy of the Cuban Revolution and together with the highest structures of the party and the state, Cuban officials recently held talks with representatives of the United States in order to find a solution through dialogue to resolve bilateral disagreements.
Right now, Cuba is under an energy blockade and there has already been a complete blackout there.
Today we can confirm that over the past 3 months, not a single oil tanker has entered our country, and we are working under very difficult conditions that have an immeasurable impact on the lives of all our people. During the day, we generate electricity using our own oil, our thermal power plants, as well as energy from renewable sources.
The island's power system is basically running on old Soviet thermal power plants that operate on fuel oil or diesel, which has to be sourced from somewhere. But there's a blockade, there's nowhere to get fuel, and what they have will only last for a few weeks. Recent reports, including those from Reuters and opposition Cuban media, confirm that fuel reserves there are critically low. The main suppliers are Venezuela and Mexico. Well, as you can imagine, Venezuela won't be supplying anything in the near future, and Mexico is also under pressure from the United States.
One of Cuba's main allies, Russia, has already stated its position, declaring that it is unacceptable to seize another sovereign country by force.
We are convinced that the language of blackmail and threats against the island of freedom, its people and its government is absolutely counterproductive. Therefore, we will support the Cuban people in these extremely difficult times to the extent that is necessary.
So, when she talks about historical ties with the USSR and later with Russia, she leaves out the fact that these ties are basically just market relations and the maintenance of a dependent. Seriously? She condemns the sanctions against Cuba. This is a country that barged into another country, razes cities to the ground, kills thousands of civilians, kills children, strikes hospitals. And this is the country that condemns illegitimate sanctions against Cuba.
And in Russia, they also promised to support Cuba, probably the same way they support Syria, Venezuela, and Iran, mostly with words.
It is not simply that we are prepared to provide diplomatic or other forms of support to Cuba. We have been doing exactly that for many, many years now. We have close friendly relations. They have developed historically. We have always stood by Cuba in its struggle for true independence, for the right to develop along its own path, determined by its citizens to live by its own laws, to defend its national interests, to...
Honestly, I don't know how Russia will justify the loss of yet another ally. In fact, it could even be 2 allies if we're talking about Iran and Cuba, because they're taking Cuba very seriously now. Donald Trump said that any remnants of Soviet influence, Putin's contacts with Cuba, he doesn't care. That means the Monroe Doctrine, the United States controls this hemisphere. Goodbye, Putin, get out of here. And Putin didn't even make a sound.
Dictatorships around the world are collapsing like dominoes, and many analysts are already saying that Putin is next. It's only a matter of time.
Israel is seeking Ukraine's help in intercepting Iranian drones. Jerusalem has requested talks with Kyiv. But the real question is, should Ukraine get involved in yet another layer of global conflict? More details in our report.
The sophisticated drone warfare that initially began within the borders of Ukraine has now rapidly spread across various other international regions and territories. It is a highly inexpensive and devastatingly powerful force, and it has become increasingly difficult to stop. Putin and Iran have created a weapon of terror together. On the parts of one of the drones that was destroyed in a Middle Eastern country, evidence was found proving Russia's involvement in manufacturing weapons to aid Iran.
Military cooperation between Iran and Russia is no secret. We have cooperated with each other in the past, and this cooperation continues and I hope will continue in the future. I will not disclose the details of our cooperation with other countries right in the middle of a war.
While Europe refuses to join the US and Israel's war against Iran, a full-scale NATO mission also seems unlikely. Israel may turn to Ukraine for help.
Israel was aware of the drone threat, aware that Iran and Iran's allies and proxies possessed them. Nevertheless, for a number of reasons, they did not approach this issue with maximum responsibility, and as a result, they had to pay a certain price during the war. When you are not properly prepared, the enemy makes you pay that price.
The initiative is connected to experience. Israel is interested in discussing possible cooperation. Zelensky is not opposed.
In this sense, Ukraine possesses a vast amount of knowledge gained on the battlefield.
Ukraine, by virtue of being on the front lines of this drone war, and I would say was the first to use small drones so successfully and on such a large scale, as well as to fight against them, since it was the first to be hit by the Iranian Shaheds.
Ukraine allegedly sent 3 groups of military experts to help countries assess their air defense systems.
We can then send our specialists to protect the civilian population.
Iran has already issued threats that Ukraine could become a legitimate target.
By providing support to the Israeli regime with drones, the failed Ukraine has effectively become involved in the war and, according to Article 51 of the UN Charter, has turned its entire territory into a legitimate target for Iran.
Tehran may increase its arms supplies to Russia or expand its cooperation with Moscow. Although Ukraine's role in this assistance is purely defensive, says the president.
They approached us for expert assistance on air defense issues. Air defense is not about attacks.
Let us recall that in 2023, Israel rejected Ukraine's proposal to jointly work on intercepting Iranian drones, stating that it was not interested. And now, unlike the countries of the Persian Gulf, the country, having the Iron Dome as experts claim, is able to intercept missiles and UAVs.
At present, kamikaze drones are, at most, an irritant for Israel and by no means a major problem. In the previous war with Iran, the enemy launched between 1,000 and 1,500 drones, but the exact number is unknown. Almost all of them were shot down, except for one. In this war, Iran is mainly using medium-range ballistic missiles against Israel. By the way, this is precisely the type of weaponry that Russia does not use against Ukraine. And thank God, because Russia simply doesn't have them.
The process of exchanging a wide range of supplementary capabilities and technologies is always highly advantageous for everyone involved.
Yes, Ukraine will be an exceptionally significant global player, because absolutely nothing advertises or promotes a product around the world like proven real-world combat experience.
Ukraine has truly gained unique experience in countering Iranian drones. Other countries have also become interested in this experience.
He has what I need, and I have what he needs, so I'm ready for this dialogue. I think it's an important conversation.
So what is Ukraine's benefit?
Any country always acts in its own interest and no one acts against it. If something is not beneficial for Ukrainians, they won't do it. It's as simple as that. How to get this benefit, even if it's in money? If there is a request to acquire something, whether for money, barter, or something else, both sides choose and decide for themselves.
Israel tried not to be active, refused to supply weapons, and since 2022 has provided Ukraine only humanitarian aid.
Israel has a wide range of weapons and weapon systems that may be of interest to Ukraine. Some of these weapons, however, Israel has not supplied lethal weapons to Ukraine so far due to concerns that Russia might provide Iran with more dangerous systems than those Iran currently possesses. This would ultimately lead to a direct threat to Israeli military personnel who are engaged in conflict with Iran.
For our country, sharing experience strengthens our political position. We stop being just a recipient of aid for the fight and instead become part of the global security system.
If someone wants to acquire something, they can buy it for money or receive some other opportunities in exchange.
Moreover, cooperation with Israel potentially opens access to technologies, especially in the field of air defense and counter-drone warfare.
In principle, it's not really about the Iron Dome. If we're talking about Israeli systems that are hypothetically available on the market, in my opinion, it wouldn't be the Iron Dome that would interest Ukraine the most. There are other possibilities, all kinds of them. The Iron Dome is just well known to many people, but in reality, as I already mentioned, there are other options as well.
Ukraine is interested in ending the war in the Middle East. Every single fortnight, the Kremlin is consistently receiving an extraordinary and substantial 1.5 to 2 billion additional petrodollars due to the blocked Strait of Hormuz, which are then systematically transformed into lethal weapons that are used to kill Ukrainians.
Ukraine has once again outperformed NATO. At least that's the claim making waves after joint naval exercises off the coast of Portugal. Another triumph for Ukrainian forces and an awkward moment for the alliance. Details ahead.
NATO troops have once again been defeated by the Ukrainians. When they say that Ukraine doesn't meet NATO standards, I think Ukraine has already surpassed those standards a bit.
The North Atlantic Alliance has once again invited Ukraine to participate in exercises, probably to take revenge for their crushing defeat at the Hendekok exercises in Estonia. They took place last year, and their results shocked Western generals. At that time, a Ukrainian team of just 10 fighters simulated the destruction of 17 armored vehicles and carried out about 30 strikes on other targets in half a day. In real combat, the alliance's troops would have simply been wiped out. And now, NATO generals have decided to tempt fate a second time, but this time not on land. They proposed a theoretically win-win scenario for themselves.
Let's play at sea this time. All right, let's do it, our Cossacks said. We took our Chaikas and set sail for Portugal. 5-0. We sank everything they put out. Well, it was a simulation. Obviously, they worked with those ships without any explosives.
Ukraine was on the red team. In fact, it was leading it. The Ukrainian team also included units from the US, the UK, Spain, and other countries. They faced off against the blue team, which consisted of other NATO forces. There were 5 training scenarios. They practiced port defense, escorting maritime convoys, and attacks on those very convoys. The Ukrainians brought Magura sea drones to the exercises, including several versions of these unmanned vehicles. One of them was equipped with reconnaissance equipment and an explosive charge, while another was fitted with a machine gun. At this point, the enemy might as well have raised the white flag, especially considering that Russian ships literally fled the Black Sea because of those same Maguras. In fact, these sea drones are even dangerous for aircraft. NATO forces tried to fight back, but in the end, they lost a frigate. Well, to be precise, they would have lost it if this had been a real battle. According to journalists, during the simulated attack, the red team scored so many hits on the NATO frigate that in a real battle it would have sunk. 5 minutes later, the blue team, still unaware of what had happened, asked in the group chat, "So, are you going to attack us or not?" The blue team couldn't even detect the weapon the red team used to strike them. As a result, the team led by Ukraine defeated the NATO forces with a clean sweep, 5-0.
A triumph of this magnitude is certainly not merely a matter of coincidence, nor is it simply some kind of highly unusual or extraordinary tactical approach. It is a natural outcome. NATO countries have become accustomed to a peaceful period of military development, specifically in terms of military training. Historically, large and broad naval platforms have been utilized in environments where critical, long-term, and large-scale strategic decisions are typically made. However, real-world experience has demonstrated that the deployment of what is known as a mosquito fleet, as seen recently in Ukraine, and the strategic use of small assets by smaller forces, can present a significant and formidable challenge to those massive traditional naval fleets that currently exist today.
This is exactly what the Ukrainians have clearly demonstrated. A traditional fleet would simply be destroyed. In fact, that's exactly what happened to the Russian fleet. The purpose of such exercises is precisely to point out NATO's weaknesses and give them a chance to be prepared if, or rather when, Russia decides on new aggression.
Ukraine is not just a recipient of aid. Right now, it is a driver of security in Europe. And in this way, by showing our partners what we do and how we do it, they see their own mistakes, their own shortcomings, and accordingly, they strengthen and enhance their capabilities and abilities. And this overall strengthens the pan-European context. Ukraine is an integral part of Europe's security here.
But after a second crushing victory over NATO forces, one can't help but wonder, why is Ukraine so eager to join the alliance? Ukrainians are clearly stronger now, and on the contrary, it is the North Atlantic Alliance that should want Ukraine to join them. In reality, both sides will benefit.
For Ukraine, that's obvious. To become part of a common security system where there's no need to invent some kind of guarantees for Ukraine that might exist in the future, but no one knows how they would actually work. NATO already has established protocols and a system, and by joining this common system, we become part of it. Inside, not on the edge or off to the side, not somehow separate, but within this system that is already designed to protect us. That's why this is necessary both for Ukraine and for NATO. Moreover, they are making use of Ukrainian experience. In fact, the Ukrainian experience of conducting warfare at sea is important.
But ultimately, it's politicians who make the decisions. And the United States itself has said directly, Ukraine's accession to NATO is impossible in the near future. But here's an interesting detail. During the exercises, US units were on the Ukrainian side. Coincidence or fear of being defeated?
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video and subscribe to stay informed about the main headlines. See you soon!